Hello?
Yo, what's up, cuzzo? What's up, man?
Yeah, what's up?
I'm telling you, it's crazy what's going on out there, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Right? You saw that Cardi? Coronavirus.
Yeah, that's crazy, bro. That's crazy. Oh, you a fool for that one. you a fool. You always been funny.
Really quick though, the reason why I called is because I saw that little post that you had about the airline stocks being beaten down on your Instagram story. Which, like, by the way, if people don't follow you already on Instagram, they really should, just because that's the best way to get a hold of you directly. But I have your number, so I was just calling you up because, like, should I buy the Delta Airline stock?
Oh, sure, yeah. Happy to help, man. Have you looked into the balance sheet or the earnings or anything like that? I'm gonna take that stressful music to mean, no? So you didn't listen to the earnings calls or nothing?
Earnings call? That's why I'm calling you. You give black folks a little bit of money and they can't even talk to their own cousins. This man really
Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about a question that I've been getting a lot. What should I be doing with my money in this crash? So I love the questions. I love when you guys send me messages on Instagram. I'll put my Instagram on the screen right here. Feel free to go follow me over there. Send me a message. Send me any questions, video topics, whatever you want to send. Just send messages over there on the Instagram. I feel like I'm in a unique position to talk about this just because I tend to keep my finger on the pulse of the stock market. But additionally, I have my finger very closely on the pulse of the COVID-19 situation because I am in a lab in LabCorp. I work in the lab and I actually run the respiratory samples that we send out to the state, that we send out to the University of Washington. And not only do I work at LabCorp, I work at LabCorp Seattle. So I'm right in the epicenter as far as United States COVID deaths. I'm able to see how many of these respiratory samples are coming in versus how many of these samples are positive for some other respiratory virus versus, how many samples are actually COVID positive. So one thing that I will say is that there's a lot of numbers out there and there's a lot of people that are getting tested. A lot of people are freaking out. A lot of people are rightfully so freaking out. Look, I don't want to diminish how people are feeling during this situation, but it's not as bad as it seems. We're doing a pretty good job containing it. We're doing a very good job testing for it. They just got test kits sent out. We'll be running those. I'm sure when I go to work on Monday, we'll be running a lot more of those tests. So things are being managed the best that we can. All of the laboratory staff is working lots of overtime. We're working day and night. Nurses working really hard. Doctors working really hard. We're trying to manage this thing and get it under control. There's a lot to consider before you decide what you should be doing in this crisis. And I would have a lot of questions for anybody who directly came up to me and asked me, what should I be doing with my money in this crisis? Now, obviously, if you hit me up directly through Instagram, I can ask you all of these questions, but making a video, I just have to make kind of a playbook so that I can give you this playbook and say, if I was in this situation, I would consider taking this route. Questions that I would have if somebody were asking me what they should do with their money would be, what does your savings rate look like? And as a follow-up question to that, I would ask them, what does your budget look like? What does your monthly budget look like? Do you have a monthly budget? Do you know what it takes for you to get through 3 to 6 months? What level of cash do you have sitting around? How much cash do you have just in savings? In other words, not invested, not in gold, not in Bitcoin, not in stocks, bonds, real estate equity, or any things of that nature. How secure is your job? Another question that I would have is, what does your income look like? Are you making your income from one source? How much is your income? Do you have any debt? And if so, what does it look like? Is it credit card debt? Is it student debt? Is it a mortgage? Is it eating up half of your take-home pay? What does your debt look like? So we're gonna get into all of those questions and hopefully you guys like this video. If you do, make sure you give it a thumbs up and let's get into it. So numero uno, budget and savings rate. I would want to know initially what someone's savings rate. If someone is saving like 5% of their income, I would want to know why. So then I would want to know their budget. What is their income looking like and how much of it is being eaten up by what expenses? If someone's not making very much money and that's why they're eating up all of their money with expenses, then that's one thing. But another thing would be if they're making a lot of money and they need to cut back on their expenses. That would be the first thing that I would focus on. Let's say that somebody's making 120K and they've got like $1,000 to save every month. Well, we need to cut some stuff back because we need to start piling up some cash. Unless you already have some cash you fucking pile up that. All right, I'm gonna stop saying on camera. Let's take a scenario where someone's making $120,000 a year, but they're spending say $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. All right, well, given the times and given the fact that you want to invest, the first thing that you need to look at is your budget. You need to figure out what is absolutely necessary. You need to figure out, are you house broke? Are you spending more than 40, 50, 60% of your income on a mortgage, for example, or on rent? Are you house broke? Are you spending way too much money on food? Are you spending way too much money on vacations? Look, these things are all nice. These things all make us feel good, but in the long term, they just lead us down a path of ruin. It's very easy to just say, you know what? I like these things. I like spending money on these things, but you're putting yourself in the way of harm. You're putting yourself in the way of being in a bad way, in a bad situation, if you're not saving your money. You don't even have to save 30, 40% of your money. That's just kind of what people in the FIRE community do, but I mean, you need to at least save some of it. At least 15 to 20%. Now let's say that you're in the other boat where you're spending a lot of your money, and I look at your budget and your budget is pretty razor thin. Well, in that case, what you need to do is focus on increasing your income. I wouldn't be focused on investing. I wouldn't even really be focused on learning about investing. I would be focused on trying to increase my income. Whatever capital I have, maybe putting that into books, putting that into courses, putting that into something that's going to increase my income. Maybe try to go into sales, try to go sell something, maybe try to go do Uber. Just anything that I can do, get a little side hustle going, get some extra income going. All right, number 2, cash levels. Now I alluded to this earlier, but cash levels are very important to whether or not you should be investing. Cash levels are very important for times like these, times when you lose your job. A ton of my friends have just lost their job. A ton of my friends have just lost their job to no fault of their own. Some of them work for small companies, and those small companies, if things don't open back up, if commerce doesn't resume, those companies are going to go under. That's when it's important to have sufficient cash levels, 3, maybe even up to 6 months, depending on how unstable your job is, depending on how many sources of income you have, maybe even 6 months of expenses saved up in just cash, not in investments. So yeah, depending on your situation, how much cash you have around, I would say that a lot of people right now should not be investing at all. And let's talk a little bit about why. Economic slowdowns. What causes economic slowdowns? Besides this one, I mean, coronavirus, but economic slowdowns, what's the underlying reason? The underlying reason is because of business slowdown, right? So there's less spending at businesses. When there's less spending at businesses, businesses don't have money. Money doesn't come from nowhere, so then they have to cut employees. As employees get cut, they can't pay their bills. As bills can't get paid, they can't pay their rent. As rent can't get paid, landowners can't pay their mortgage. Everything starts to get sold off. People are selling their homes. People have to sell their stocks so that they can pay their bills. There's more selling. And then eventually it gets to the point where people are just selling their stuff for ludicrous prices. Anyone who was prepared, someone who had a lot of cash sitting around, someone who was saving during the good times, they're going to get a lot of good deals on some stocks. They're going to get a lot of good deals on real estate. But someone who did not prepare, if you're in a situation where you did not prepare, you should be retroactively trying to get prepared. And let's talk about how we can get prepared. One way that we can get prepared is by trying to diversify our income. So like I said before, trying to pick up a couple side hustles. If you got one source of income right now that's not very stable, I'm in a very unique situation personally, just because I'm in the position where I'm running COVID samples. So if I lose my job, that would be a very bad thing for Seattle, because LabCorp is the main people that are running these samples, these respiratory samples. If I'm out of work, then things are really bad. Additionally, my other source of income, main source, is the military. And for the next 6 years, I cannot lose that job. Trust me, I tried. I asked. I pleaded. I begged. I'm not losing that source of income for the next 6 years. And maybe not ever. Maybe I'll just be a lifer. We'll see. I don't know. But if your source of income is less reliable than being stuck in the military or than running COVID samples, you might want to consider having up to 6 months of expenses. But if you're not stuck in your employment for the next 6 years, and I'm not going to say I'm stuck in the military. I mean, I'm stuck in the military. Let's just be real. GI Bill in college, 2 out of 10, would not again. All right, next consideration, debt. What does your debt look like? Do you have a lot of debt? Do you have a little bit of debt? What's the interest rate look like on your debt? Do you have credit card debt? Do you have student debt? Do you have car debt? Potentially, you might think about selling your car if you have the car debt, because car debt is it's dumb debt. And all you fans of truisms can say it with me now. Buying things that you don't need with money that you don't have to impress people that you don't even like. I'm not a fan. Anyways, back into it. Credit card debt, I would pay that off first. One, because those interest rates are suicidal interest rates. Those are insane interest rates. In addition to it having an extremely high interest rate, you can always go back into credit card debt if you need to. That could be your initial emergency fund, which is a terrible emergency fund to have. But if you have no cash and all you have is credit card debt and yourself and your work, your willingness to work, then that is your emergency fund for now. Your credit cards. You can't go back into student debt. You can't go back into car debt. You can't go back into you can go back into mortgage debt, but anyways, your home value is probably going to go down soon, so I wouldn't count on that. Okay, so let's say that we've gotten rid of our credit card debt and now we have our emergency fund, and obviously that's not a real emergency fund. You want to have cash as an emergency fund, but you can go backwards now. Now, I just have one question for you. Are you a risk taker? Oh man. Are you that risky Call of Duty player that likes to rush the B flag? You like all the guts and all the glory? You want an extra 3% on your money? Well, this might be for you. You might want to, instead of paying your debts down, you might want to invest your way there. Technically, according to the 8% average of the S&P 500, that would be the quickest way from point A to point B. But technically it doesn't always work for everybody's situations. That is a robotic answer, and we are not robots. So things to consider if you want to invest your way out of debt are: one, your time horizon. Are you trying to get there in 1 or 2 years, or do you have 5 to 7 years? 5 to 7 years, that's a little bit safer. 1 to 2 years, I mean, you could see a huge crash. The biggest crash that we've ever seen was before the Great Depression. Peak to trough, it was about 86% over 3 years. So if you're trying to get there in 3 years, maybe not the best idea to try to invest your way out of debt. But if you're trying to get there in 5 to 7 years, it could be something to consider. Technically, you would get there faster by putting your money into the market. Please do fact check this before you just accept anything that I'm saying as fact. But I think it's about the last 120 years. If you just go back any 10-year period, you can't find a negative return. So anywhere between 5 to 7 years, that's a pretty certain thing that you're probably going to see a positive return. Of course, nothing is guaranteed, but if you look at the tailwind, or the American tailwind as Warren Buffett calls it, there's inflation, the price of goods is always going up, the value of business is always going up with the price of goods. There's always dividends, always dividend reinvestment. So investing your way there, depending on how long it's going to take you to actually pay off your debt, how much income you're bringing in, it could be the way for you. But just realize what risk you're taking on. One of the risks that you're taking on is the ability to go backwards. Now, you have to be very disciplined if you're going to do this, because let's say that you just want to go on that cruise for whatever reason, and you see, well, I've got all these stocks, so I'll just sell them off. And in reality, you're actually at a negative net worth and you're just going further into debt to do this. But it doesn't look like that because you have this liquid, what you consider to be money. But if you just throw everything into debt, then you don't ever really see that money. You don't ever really have a lot of cash. And something like that can actually give you a lot of motivation to actually put more money in. So psychologically, you just have to choose what's right for you. Maybe it's right for you to just throw all the money into the debt. Maybe it's right for you to invest your way there. But for me, if you want to use the mathematically correct one, the way for you to keep discipline is to understand what savings rate you're trying to hit and continue to hit that savings rate and continue to use your budget and make sure that you're building your net worth and you're sticking to your plan. Now, once you start to get outside of your plan, that's just a recipe for disaster, regardless of which one of the plans that you're following. So, in my opinion, I would say, figure out what's best for you. For most people, it's going to be best to throw in more money into the debt, just because that keeps people on track a little bit better. But for mathematical purposes, if you are a more robotic human like me, like my robot voice, like my robot personality, I would just go the more mathematically sensible way, just because I'm that type of person. But most people are not that type of person. So that's a good transition into our next thing. Next thing is, what does your risk tolerance look like as far as your time horizon, and are you able to stomach risk? So I would ask you a question. What would you do if your stocks were to go down by 20%, 30%, 40%, 60%? Would you sell them, or would you see them as 60% off? Would you be happy to buy? If you were in the market and you're not completely new to the market, if you were in the market in December 2018, were you buying during that time, or were you freaking out during that time? Or maybe you were doing both. I was doing both. But depending on what you were doing during that time, that kind of determines your risk tolerance. If you want to find someone who's very stoic about the market, look at someone like a Warren Buffett. That guy doesn't care what the market is doing. He cares about the underlying business. There's an imaginary man called Mr. Market that Benjamin Graham refers to. Mr. Market basically has severe depression when things are going down, and Mr. Market gets very optimistic when things are going up. Mr. Market wants a lot of money when things are going up, and Mr. Market will sell for anything when things are going down. Now, that is a reflection of the economy and the world out there. When people feel like they need to get their assets out of the market, say somebody's retirement account is going down, or say somebody lost their job, so now they have to sell at any price, Mr. Market, or that person on the other side of the transaction, they're willing to sell for anything. That doesn't mean anything of the balance sheet of the business. That doesn't mean anything of the success of the business. That's just what Mr. Market wants to sell his shares for. And the last thing before we actually get into the stock portion of this video is, do you have a better use for that money in general? Do you have a better use for that money? Would you be better off, say, spending that money in a course? Would you be better off spending that money in your own business? Would you be better off just putting that money under your mattress because you know you can't handle the volatility? Would you be better off, buying yourself a used car because you're walking to work right now, or you're biking to work right now? Do you have a better usage for that money that's going to generate you a more positive return over the long run? If yes, then you should absolutely go do that thing. But if you feel like you're looking around and you don't see anywhere any opportunity to get a better return on that money, then sure, consider putting that money into the stock market if you're in the position to be safe and not have to sell at the bottom. All right, next order of business would be, do you know anything about the stock market? Do you know anything about stock market history? Do you understand why things go up? Do you understand why things go down? Do you understand that the stock market has been building wealth for people since the 1400s? Even Isaac Newton was in the stock market when they were trading actual paper shares of companies. For example, you could buy stock in companies that were going overseas to find, the new world. I'm not going to get into that. Anyways, the stock market is a very old thing. Do you understand it? Do you understand why it moves and how the ebbs and flows of the stock market? If you don't understand the stock market in general, two very good books to understand the stock market in general are The Little Book of Common Sense Investing and Random Walk Down Wall Street. These books will tell you the history of the stock market, the mania that happens, the panic, all of the mistakes that have happened throughout history. It's really good to see just so that you can kind of keep a level head. When you've already experienced things through a book and you see them again, you're just like, oh, there's another one of those. For example, I was a biology major, and when I would go out into the field and I would see, say, some animal that we studied in the classroom or some plant that we studied in the classroom, I would just say, hey, there's one of those. It's the same thing with the stock market. You see a crash when you've already read about hundreds of crashes, you're like, oh, there's another one of those. Those books are really good. They're just going to help you keep a level head and just treat the crashes like there's just another one of those. All right. Next order of business is, do you know anything about individual stocks? And if you don't know anything about individual stocks, if you don't understand things like earnings multiples, things like the business prospects, things to look for in an individual stock, you need to understand how to buy a business. Like, for example, if you were going to go buy, say, a McDonald's franchise, you wouldn't ask them, what did your earnings look like the past 3 hours or something like that? Like, you wouldn't ask them, what did earnings look like today or something? Or what did earnings look like last week? You would want to know what their earnings looked like over the last 3 to 5, maybe 10 years before you bought that business. So you should treat buying a part of a business the exact same way. So two good books for that are The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. This is Warren Buffett's old mentor. He really cites this book often, and I love this book. It teaches you everything that you need to know. I feel like some of it is a little bit dated as far as the earnings multiples, but we'll see if we end up back at those earnings multiples. We are quickly going towards those earnings multiples if we do end up at those earnings multiples, then dividend yields are going to be very high and it's going to be a very good time to invest. But anyways, I digress. The next good book to read is The Little Book That Still Beats the Market. This one just tells you a little bit about a strategy that basically tells you to buy beat down companies in beat down times. So it's a really good book. It tells you a little bit about, index investing and just the market in general, how certain companies fall out of favor and just at certain times business in general falls out of favor. But in the long term, it's good to own businesses. And the last thing that I would direct people to do, if they've done all of the prior things and they are safe to invest, they've got enough cash, they don't have a ton of debt sitting around, is look at the company reports. So if you go to any company's investor relations page, you can find out all of the things that they tell you to look for in these books. You can find out their earnings, you can find out their revenues, you can find out their plans for expansion, you can find out what they're doing overseas, you can find out everything about that company. So before you decide to invest in an individual stock, you need to do all of that. But at the end of the day, what I've been doing recently, just because I don't have a lot of time to look at individual stocks, and that's not a very good return on my time with the little amount of capital that I have personally. The best return on my time is to work. Right now, the best return on my time is not to figure out what is the best stock for me to put my money in. It doesn't matter how much return I get on $500. Like, for example, I just put $500 into the market because I'm still paying off student debt and I'm still stacking up cash. It doesn't matter what return I get on that cash. It's not going to be that much. It's not going to be life-changing. So I'm not really looking at the market that much. So if you know a little bit about index fund investing, that's not a bad option either. If you want to take your time and spend it bringing more money in, putting more logs on the fire rather than focusing on fanning the fire, the current fire. So just to go ahead and recap everything that we talked about, all the questions that I would want to ask you if you're asking me, what should I be doing with my money? I would ask you, should you be saving or should you be investing? What capacity do you have to take on risk? For example, do you have a family? How safe is your job? How many sources of income do you have? Do you have an emergency fund? How much money are you making? Do you have a budget? Things of that nature. Are you prepared to lose your job? What is your time horizon? Do you have a better usage for this money? Do you understand the stock market in general and index funds? And do you belong in index funds? Do you understand individual stocks and some basic accounting? And have you researched the companies that you're looking into? If you can't say yes to all of these things or don't understand the answers to all of these things, then I would tell you to please go do some research and figure out those things for yourself. I can't figure it out for you, but I would love to talk to you about it. So hopefully you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure you give it a like and comment down below if you want to have a conversation with me. Follow me on Instagram if you want to open up a dialogue, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Well, that depends on your exact situation, which I cannot figure out exactly what your situation is, but I can figure out your situation if you hit the like button and you comment down below. That's going to help me out tremendously to help the channel grow. And wow, that rhymed. That was pretty good. Maybe I should rap. In the studio, beat the meat, yo. I'm in the sheets, yo. Creep, creep. Did my phone really just turn off? Oh, the beat dropped. I didn't know the beat was gonna drop out like that. Okay. Fuck it up. Let's go. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. On the mic. New mic. Sounds right. Yes, I do it. I am fluent in one language. Don't speak Spanish. Don't speak no Spain, no Mexican. I'm on the border. No crossing. Border crossings. I play games. Don't play no games. I got the fame. Got 300 plus 1,000 subs. Yes, them elbows I rub. I come to the club. I'm up in the club. A rub-a-dub-dub. Wash your hands, subs. Please do that. Oh my goodness, bonus rap? Bonus rap at the end of the video? Oh my god.